Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the History Cloak channel. I'm Mr. McGee. On today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at the word Intifada. The word Intifada has been bandied about recently with protests over the Israel-Hamas war, so I thought it would be great to take a look at the history of the word Intifada. Now, I don't mean history as in we're going to take a look at the etymology of the word. What I mean is we're going to take a look at that word in the context of history. Where do we first see that word used? What is the First Intifada? What is the Second Intifada? What happened in those intifadas? So we're going to take a look at that and hopefully get a better idea of what that word means and think about, should a person use that word? Should a person not use that word? And hopefully the more we know, the better. And so, without further ado, let's begin. Well, first off, what does the word Intifada mean? Well, the word Intifada means uprising. So, uprising, in this case, a violent uprising. The First Intifada is going to start December 6th, 1987, and it's going to last until 1993. On December 6th, 1987, a Jewish man named Shlomo Takal was stabbed to death while in Gaza waiting for a business appointment. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait a second, I thought Intifada was a Palestinian uprising. How does this start with a Jewish man being stabbed to death? Well, December 6th, you had the Jewish man that was stabbed to death. On December 7th, there was a car accident in the Palestinian town of Jabalia. Now, from everything that I've been able to find, this seems like just a tragic accident. So, you had two trucks driving through Jabalia. A truck swerves to avoid a car, and that car, which is carrying 4 Palestinian men, hits the second truck. And that second truck is driven by a Jewish man. Now, rumor begins to spread through the Palestinian towns that this was a reprisal. This was revenge because of the stabbing of Shlomo Takal the day before. From this point, riots begin to start. So we have the tragic accident the day after. Then, on December 9th, a 17-year-old Palestinian is shot to death after throwing a Molotov cocktail at an Israeli army patrol. Now, we need to say, guess what? A great way to not be shot is not to throw a Molotov cocktail, which can kill someone, at an army patrol. Probably not the best thing to do. Well, many Palestinians then begin mass riots after the shooting. With the mass riots having started, by December 12th, 6 Palestinians had been killed and 30 had been injured. With the violence increasing, rumors begin to spread in Gaza that the Israeli government are taking injured Palestinian youths who've been involved in the violence and taking them to Israeli hospitals to finish them off. Now, these rumors have no basis in reality, but it begins to spread, and the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, along with others, begin to say and spread through the people in Gaza that the Israeli government is killing youth, not actually helping them in their hospitals. This, of course, only causes the violence to increase during this period. In order to make a long story short, or in this case a long video short, over the first 4 years of the Intifada, you had 3,600 Molotov cocktail attacks against the Israeli Defense Force. You had over 100 grenade attacks against the Israeli Defense Force, and over 600 attacks with guns or explosives against the Israeli Defense Force. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, which had been fomenting a lot of these attacks, targeted not just the Israeli Defense Force, but also Israeli citizens. Over the course of the First Intifada, during this first 4-year period, 16 Israeli civilians and 11 Israeli soldiers were killed in Palestinian territories, and more than 1,400 Israeli civilians and more than 1,700 Israeli soldiers were injured in these attacks over the 4-year period. Interestingly enough, during this First Intifada, you also had a civil war in the Palestinian government between the PLO and Hamas, and between different factions of the PLO. Now, when I say that you had a civil war in the PLO, I don't just mean, you had debates back and forth, and so one was arguing for doing something one way and one was arguing for doing something another way. No, I mean war and death. Number one, the PLO had death squads that were sent to assassinate Arabs who they believed were collaborating with the Israeli government. 118 Arabs were killed by the PLO death squads during this time. Now, the violence didn't stop there. The battle within the PLO became so intense that by the end of the First Intifada, nearly 1,000 Palestinians had been killed by other Palestinians, by members of the PLO, as they battled with each other for control. And on the other side, around 1,100 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces during the uprising, or the Intifada. The First Intifada officially came to an end in 1993, when the Israeli government and the PLO, who had been in secret talks with each other, signed the Oslo Accords, or if we want it to be official, the Declaration on Interim Self-Government Arrangements. Right, the Oslo Accords is what we normally just refer to them as. What are the Oslo Accords, you ask? Well, basically, the Oslo Accords said that the Israeli government would pull their troops out of the Gaza Strip. They would also pull their troops out of Jericho, which is a town in the West Bank, and a Palestinian government would be established that would eventually control most of the West Bank. Now, as I said at the beginning, it's kind of important to understand what that word intifada means when we talk about protests that we see in the US. And intifada basically is a violent uprising. It resulted not only in the deaths of Israeli civilians, because intifada is a term talking about the Palestinians rising up against Israel. It also resulted in a civil war among Palestinians that resulted in close to 1,000 deaths. I think it would be safe to say that calling for an intifada means you're ending up calling for violence. That word has always been associated with violence, and intifada has never been seen as a peaceful uprising. It's always been seen as violence, whether it's the Molotov cocktails, the grenades, the shootings, the explosions. It's never been a good thing. So I think it's safe to say that's not something that should be called for. Now, in the next video, we'll take a look at the second intifada. Now, I know you must be in shock. How could this video be so short? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Christmas miracles happen all the time. Unfortunately, it's hard for me to plan for delays, but I do want to try to make the videos a little bit more truncated so that they're easier to digest. But I hope that you got some information out of this video that helps you in understanding what's going on in current events. So, as per the usual, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them respectfully and politely in the description box below. I'm Mr. McGee. Take care.